icing my. I don't know if you see it.
Yeah. Yeah, that was last week, right? On the 25th?
Yeah, I got my surgery done. Hold on, this fucking thing is gonna fall. I had an old surgery and I had a new surgery. I had a old injury and I had a new injury in my training camp. And in my fight, I tore my meniscus and my MCL and my ACL was torn 80%.
Ooh.
Yeah, and I fought through it. I mean, that's why. You know, I know it was a close. I don't know if you watched my last fight.
Yeah, I did. I watched it. I had you winning it, but
I know it was a close fight. I mean,
was.
yeah, of course, it wasn't the most exciting. Like in a sense, I wasn't being offensive, but I was in a lot of pain, and I tried very hard to hide it.
Yeah, I thought you did a good job. I mean, I didn't notice it, and obviously there's Canadian bias for me too. I'm Canadian, so anytime a Canadian fights, if it goes to decision, they automatically win in my mind.
No, for sure. But you look at the numbers. I mean, if you look at the numbers, yeah, I have more significant strikes. Yes, it was a very close fight. Don't get me wrong. I take my hats off for Francisco. He's a very, very durable fighter. A lot of experience, you know.
Yeah, I had you winning rounds 1 and 2, and I thought you outstruck him in the first, and then 2 I think was you guys had the same amount of strikes. I just found because he hit you more in the head, and you did a lot of leg kicks, and so I think it all kind of came down to scoring.
Yeah, but he got me a couple of shots. He did land some shots, clean shots, but most of them I dodged them.
Yeah. Yeah, it's hard. It's hard to score, and I find a lot of the judges are, some of them are boxing judges, so they often score things differently than an MMA judge would, and I think that's one of the biggest issues now in MMA too is the issue with judging, and no one scores fights the exact same way.
Joe Silva, just go back to Joe Silva. I actually liked him a lot. He was dealing with my manager. Well, I had a lot of my career is like a roller coaster ride. You know, I went through like my manager Mitch Mayberger, and then I left him. My older brother came into the picture, and then he got me hooked up with Fear the Fighter, and he got me hooked up with Hector Castro, and then they after Fear the Fighter bullshit, and then they left the scene, and then I got back connected to Mitch because it's a shitty business, you know, and I don't really trust people. So he was there from the beginning, so I was loyal to him. So I went back to him. But Joe Silva, he was matchmaking most of my fights until he left, and then Sean Shelby took over.
Yeah, I really like Joe Silva. I thought his matchmaking was spot on, and I like the way he just shot his shot. He just sent Dana White a message saying what he'd do differently, and I think it's kind of like the definition and something a lot of people need to do. Just if it's something you want to do, shoot your shot. He became a matchmaker just by sending Dana White an email, which I think is kind of cool.
100%. Hey, can you hold on 2 seconds, brother?
Yep, no worries.
How is Halifax, man? It's been a long time. I haven't been in my home city.
Yeah, it's good. I mean, obviously a lot going on now with the pandemic. Everything's kind of shut down. It's hard to get out and do stuff. They just recently opened it up, and I think businesses and stuff are starting to open up. I think next Monday things kind of go back to normal, but overall not too bad. We had that mass shooting, but I think for the pandemic itself and everything, it hasn't been too bad.
Okay, cool, man.
How are things there?
Can you just if you don't mind me asking, tell me a little bit about yourself. I just see you at Twitter matchmaker. I don't know who you are.
Yeah, so I'm an accountant. So I work 9 to 5 as an accountant, and I've been a huge MMA fan for years. And I started MMA matchmaking just as a hobby, where I just matchmake fighters after their fights, and people started following it, and I was like, yeah, cool. And then with the pandemic, I couldn't watch fights because everything got shut down. So I said, you know what, I'm going to start a podcast and just ask fighters to come on. So I had right away guys like Mike Rodriguez, Andre Ewell, Jamal Herring. So I had some really, really high level guys really, really early on, which is really surprising. I was expecting it to be a lot. harder to talk to MMA fighters. But I found everyone's pretty open and they're willing to talk.
Well, because that's the martial arts. That's what martial. Because most guys are. I come from a very traditional. I
Yep.
come from a very deep root. You're not gonna see many of those. A lot of, like right now, UFC, the modern mixed martial artists, they're like more like WWE. You know, very like, it's all about the ego and like talk trash. You know, what I mean, I understand it's a business, right? But I come from very old school. My teacher would like beat the fuck out of me if I would go in the streets and if I would try to hit someone. If I go to the dojo and I learn how to throw a kick, and then he tells me, if you ever go use these against people in the streets, I'm gonna kick you out of the gym. You know what I mean? I had very like old school teachers where it was just strictly, you come to the gym, you train, this is your outlet, go to a competition, and then everything else is like you stay quiet, you stay humble, like it wasn't like showing off. It was just another way for me to express myself. And one thing led to another, and I just continued training and fighting. And I went from taekwondo to karate to kickboxing, and then I got introduced to mixed martial arts. And next, I got contracted with the UFC.
Yeah, I think that background has really made you well known. I think you're the most exciting fighter in lightweight division.
Don't say that. Come on.
One of Justin Gaethje is up there too, but I think
Justin Gaethje, of course, bro. Every fighter's dream is to be a top 10 fighter. But Gaethje, if you don't mind me asking, he has a solid team behind him. No, he looks like he has a good team behind him.
Yep, he's at Elevation Fight Team, so a really, really solid group of guys there.
Where's that? Is that in Colorado?
Well, I'm not sure. I know he's got like Drew Dober, and all those guys are with him. So he's got a solid group, but I think they're smaller. They're a smaller group, and they just stay close. So it's not a big team like ATT or anything like that. Yeah. Well, what was it like training with those guys? I feel like they're so far, especially GSP. Like GSP is in a class of his own, especially in Canadian MMA. He's kind of looked at like a god. What was it like training with him?
Honestly, man, George is like. George is very hard worker, right? He has a lot of physical attributes that no matter how hard you work out with, you can never keep up to him. It's like it's just God talent, you know what I mean? He has this. Some people have it, some people don't have it, you know what I mean? And the thing is that he found his formula in a very early time. When I came into Tristar, when I came into the picture, I was a kickboxer. Developing my mixed martial arts skills, so I was already behind. George was already ahead of his time. George was already like a well set, had a good skill set with the mixed martial art. Like he understood, he had good mentors around him. So when I came into the picture, I was just learning, and because I'm able to adjust, I was able to pick it up very quick. If you consider. I was the age of 26 years old, 23 years old, and then 26, I got signed with the UFC. George been doing karate, martial arts, mixed martial arts at the age of 17, 18. He was, his first MMA coach was the crazy Russian guy, Christoph, whatever his name, I don't remember his last name, and he did a lot of underground fights, you know what I mean? So a lot of people don't know things about George, but, he was an advanced. Basically, to answer your question, he was ahead of all of us, and David Loiseau was actually side by side. George and David were best friends. They were training together, getting ready for fights, and then just things happened and people grew apart and everyone went their own way.
Yeah, obviously he's getting inducted to the UFC Hall of Fame this summer, which when it was announced, I was like, how is he not already in there? I just assumed he was. Do you have him as number one of all time?
Like me personally, or like you're talking about in the roster?
You personally, do you think George is number one all time?
You know what? George is for sure one of the best athletes in the mixed martial. It's hard for me to say who's number one, because it's all about what you're looking at. You know what I mean? It's all relative. I don't like to say one is right. So if ego's talking, I'm gonna say I'm the number one. Obviously, that's I'm gonna say I'm the best, right? Because I want to be the best martial artist. But in the record where he proved what he done, he's for sure one of the top fighters. But to be number one, you gotta look at Asia, you gotta look at European, and you gotta look at North America. There's so many high level fighters that didn't have that opportunity to showcase, if that makes sense. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
For me personally, to be the number one, you gotta be like what Conor McGregor has been doing. He went from featherweight, went to lightweight, then went to welterweight. See, that for me, I respect. Like a guy like that, I respect. You know what I mean? Because he's been pound for pound. You got to be changing weight classes and beating all the best guys in the world. So for me, that's I look at the risk. I look at who you're fighting, how many times you're fighting. You know what I mean? George was his career was very processed, very methodical.
Yeah, like he fought guys that were, I guess, smaller than him because he's a big welterweight. And he kind of came back, and I like Bisping, but it was a one-eyed Bisping. There's always that. Conor McGregor, for example, like you mentioned, willing to fight anybody, anywhere. So even though there's more losses, I think that has to go when you look at it as well, when you consider who the GOAT is. So we'll go back to your last fight. So you fought 24 times and 17 in the UFC in MMA. What was it like competing, I think, for the first time in front of no audience as a professional?
Yeah, it was very weird, It was very weird. Like, I felt like I was in the Twilight Zone. But, it felt like it was, I'm in a movie scene and we're, like, rehearsing.
Yeah.
It sounds a little weird. Like, I felt like it was kind of, it felt, unreal. But I kind of, like, honestly, I just took it the way it came. I didn't try to overthink it, because if I start overthinking things, then I'm just gonna be in my way.
What was the roller coaster events like? Because you went to Brazil, you got all the way there. I think it was the first time you competed outside of North America too.
Yeah,
in the UFC.
Yeah. Yes,
Brazil. And then it, like, you don't know if the event's happening. You got all this stuff going on. Did that play a role? And what was that like? What was all that going through your mind? What was that like?
Well, first of all, Brazil is a beautiful country. It was weird because people were saying, like, I started to where we started to enter my brain. Like, the whole training camp, people were talking about coronavirus, and I didn't really care. I was focused, I had the tunnel vision. And then after that, people started saying, like, you guys might not fight. A lot of news was coming on the social media, like Twitter, about coronavirus. And then Bellator started to say that they're going to cancel their fight. So there was a lot of rumors going back and forth. My family back at home, kind of worried about what's going on. So it was very, like, a lot of uncertainty, and it kind of, it was a shitty moment. You know what I mean? That's the best way I can put it.
Yeah. How did it feel when you got home? Because I think you were quarantined, weren't you, for 14 days?
Yeah.
Exactly. What was that like?
I mean, you're talking to a fighter, right? Like, we go to the gym where we're sweating, we're fucking grabbing each other, we're wrestling, we're kicking each other in the head. Like, I mean, viruses, God knows how many viruses, bacteria entered my body. You know what I mean? I don't really know. You know what I mean? I kind of have a strong immune system. Since a kid, I was playing outside in the streets. I don't really focus. I'm not going to stop my life for a virus that apparently is killing the world. Me personally, that's a different topic. But, I didn't let it get to me. And the only time it started to become serious when government stepped in.
Yeah. So overall, with what the UFC's doing, you like the fact that they kind of pushed it, and they were the first ones to say, like, we're going to build an island. We're going to do whatever it takes.
Yeah, of course, 100%. I mean, of course, that's what makes the fight. That's what makes the UFC, and that's what makes the fighters. We're not going to stop our life. That's what makes us the 1%, right? We kind of go through we go through the fire.
Yeah. So you've just got your knee surgery last week. Is there a timeline for your return?
I'm actually seeing my surgeon tomorrow. Like ACL, meniscus, they always give it. The doctor's always gonna give it like a 6 months, 7 months. I won't lie. You know, I had a couple of surgeries in my lifetime, and this is one of the top on the list for sure.
Is the so you're looking at maybe your like 2021 type return?
Actually, no. I'm actually hoping I'm trying to aim before next year.
Okay, so before the end of the year.
Yeah.
Is there any names that come to mind as a fight? I'm sure you, as a fighter, I'm sure you want to run the Trinaldo fight back. I think, but is there any other fights that come to mind?
I mean, listen. It's not that. I mean, if you look at my history of fighting, I got robbed a couple of my fights. You know, so judges give to the other guy. It happens. The scorecards. But for me, I always wanted to fight the top 10. Like I would love to run back Donald Cerrone. You know, I had a 2 weeks notice. I didn't really have a training camp for him. Mentally, I wasn't ready. I would love to fight a guy like Cerrone, Justin Gaethje. You know, you have like those type of strikers. You know, we're gonna keep it a standing. You know what I mean? Uh, it's a fan favorite fight. It's two guys striking it out. You know, one is a counter fighter, one is an offensive fighter. You know, I can play both sides. I can counter. I can play offense. You know, it's all about it's for me. It's always about having good preparation. That was the hardest part. You know, to find a solid trainer, that I can trust fully, a guy who's gonna put the work with me, not just you know whenever he feels like it, he wants to show his face from time to time, and then take all my fucking credit, you know, and then boss me around. You know what I mean? All the things that the fans don't see, what the fighters go through, all the bullshit, all the wannabe coaches out there, you know, they put things in my head. If John Makdessi if I'm 100% clear-minded and I go into the octagon, everyone knows that I'm going to KO that guy.
You're training at the MMA Lab now, right?
I went to Arizona because two reasons. I'm a big fan of Ben Henderson, and I fucking love the weather.
Yeah, Ben, he was in your corner down in Brazil. What's it like working with him?
Oh, he's an awesome guy. He's that man is he's a humble, he's very biggest heart. You know what I mean? He's always giving himself to other people. He's a great person, great human being, and it makes sense why he became a champion. You know what I mean? So I take my hats off Ben Henderson and all the guys from the MMA Lab. They're a great bunch of people over there.
You're now an exclusive company in the Canadian MMA world. There's only 3 guys that have competed in the UFC who are Canadian who have more fights than you. What does that feel like to be mentioned along the likes of GSP, Patrick Cote, and Sam Stout?
You know, since you're on this topic, because I've been going back and forth with my brother. He says there's nobody who's left in the Canadian roster in the UFC, because he's telling me that there's nobody, and I'm like, this is impossible.
There's a few fighters. There's guys like Kyle Nelson, but for the most part, when it comes to longevity of their careers, most people who have had long careers have kind of left. Like Elias Theodorou had left already, but I think long reigning, I think you're probably the only one left.
That's crazy. That puts some stuff that puts things in perspective. Honestly, man, I grew up. I'm one of those guys who grew up with, like, I'm a dreamer. You know, I always wanted to have a legacy. I always wanted to be known one of the best. I wanted to be known as one of the most exciting fighters in the world. I want to be known, you know, underdog. You know, I consider myself an underdog. I beat all odds. You know, I come from a middle class family. Nobody's athletic in my family. Raised in a normal Catholic household. My family, my parents, like, I didn't have a father, I didn't have a cousin who was in the fighting business. I kind of took the long, hard road. You know what I mean?
So speaking of Canadian MMA fighters, there is a Canadian MMA fighter headlining this weekend's card, Felicia Spencer, who's fighting Amanda Nunes. How do you feel about that fight? Obviously, Amanda Nunes is a killer. Possibly the greatest female of all time, in my opinion, the greatest of all time. How do you feel about that fight?
Yeah, I'm gonna watch that fight. When is it gonna be again? Is it on Saturday?
It's this Saturday, yeah.
Yeah, I'm gonna watch it. I mean, I'm always going to cheer for the Canadian. You know, that female? What's her name again? I don't remember.
Felicia Spencer.
Felicia, where's she from? What camp?
I'm not sure. I know she's from out west, but I don't know what camp.
Yeah, well, you know what? That's a great fight. That's a big platform. She's fighting. You know, what I mean, she's fighting a woman that has a big, a reputation. You know, I mean, obviously she was a champion, so it's gonna be interesting. You know, I hope the guy she does good and she doesn't break under pressure.
Yeah, she fights out of the Jungle MMA and Fitness. So I think she actually fights out of Florida, but she's from Quebec.
Yeah, see, that's the thing. You know, what I mean, that's the crazy part. Canada has to have better MMA camps. We always have to go outside of Canada to train good. We don't have good resources here.
Yeah, I think Tristar is the only well-known camp.
Yeah, Tristar Montreal is pretty much Tristar. Yeah.
Yeah. All right, man. Well, hopefully we can see you back in there soon. Hopefully that leg recovers really quickly, and really looking forward to your next fight.
Thank you, my man. Thank you for having me. Appreciate it.
All right, man. Thanks for taking the time, and sorry about the kerfuffle there at the beginning with the setup.
It's all good, brother. Have a good day, man.
All right. Yeah. You too.